Today we read about a feast at a wedding in Cana and the major social faux pas of running out of wine. In the ancient world, a wedding wasn't just another celebration, it was the event of a lifetime. The whole community was invited, and the celebration took place over several days. It was a time of abundant joy. So through the ages, theologians have asked the question, why did Jesus choose this moment, this seemingly minor crisis of running out of wine at a wedding, to perform his first miracle? I don't know if you've noticed, but John's gospel doesn't call this a miracle. John's gospel calls this a sign. A sign. A sign is something, a symbol that points towards something greater or something deeper. John's gospel records 7 different signs, each with a distinct message, a particular point it's making. So what does this sign mean? What greater truth is it pointing towards? Jesus stepped into an ordinary moment of human embarrassment and he turned it around. Let's face it, if the wedding had run out of wine, the father of the bride would have been embarrassed, the guests would have been disappointed, and the celebration they expected to go on for several days would have ended a little early. But that's it. I spent some time this week scouring maps of the Holy Land from 2,000 years ago. I searched through the entire New Testament, and I can definitively say that ABC Liquors is never mentioned. It is not shown on a single map of the Holy Land in 30 AD. In short, there was no easy place for the servants to run out and get a few extra cases of wine. Running out of wine was an embarrassment, but it wasn't a life or death situation. Nonetheless, Jesus chose to take this moment of mild distress and turn it into an extraordinary sign of God's love and God's power. At this wedding in Cana, Jesus showed up and he brought joy. And Jesus offers us the same today. And that's the deeper message of this miracle. This sign points to the deeper truth that Jesus wants to come into the ordinary moments, the moments even of mild disappointment in your life and mine, and lead us to incomprehensible joy, to the true lasting joy that can be found through a relationship with him. Jesus came to bring this deep and abiding joy. That's why Jesus later tells his friends, I came that you may have life and that you may have it abundantly. It is abundant life, it is peace, it is joy that Jesus wants each of us to find. And yet, tragically, when we look around our lives, around our communities, even around this church, it seems like we often see people who experience more stress and disappointment and anxiety than this joy. Yet from the beginning, God wove joy into the very story of creation. In Genesis, we read, God saw everything he had made, and behold, it was very good. Psalm 16 declares, in your presence there is fullness of joy. At the birth of Jesus, the angel said, I bring you good news of great joy. And we're not only meant to experience joy in our lives, we're meant to share joy with others. Paul writes in his letter to the Galatians, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, and so on and so on. You see, God calls us to lead lives of joy, not shallow happiness or momentary pleasure, but a deep, abiding joy rooted in our relationship with God and our response to God's call in our lives. In a study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, over a 5-year period, researchers asked people how often they felt positive emotions over the course of a normal day, joy or contentment or peace. The results? People who experienced many of these positive emotions were 35% likely to die during this 5-year period than people who didn't. 35%. If joy were a drug, we'd be putting it in the water. As Proverbs says, a cheerful heart is good medicine. Science says that Proverbs is right. The theologian Reynolds Price said, "Joy is a gift of the universe in which God calls us to delight in the life we're given." When Jesus performs this sign, this miracle, at this wedding in Cana, he doesn't just turn water into something greater. He makes a declaration. In the Bible we read, "Standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification." So my question is, why would Jesus choose to use these jars to transform water into wine? After all, presumably, there are empty jars that had held the previous wine. The purpose of these jars, these purification jars, was to cleanse people so they could draw closer to God. These jars had been used over and over for ritual purification, but every purification was only temporary. It was only fleeting. The person who was made pure would need to return again to cleanse themselves in weeks or maybe months. However, Jesus is saying through this miracle that he is the ultimate path to God. I am the lasting cleansing, he is saying. I will bring you to the eternal joy of an endless relationship with God. Tragically, I think so many of us have missed this message. We've failed to really hear it. Why do you think so many of us work so hard to look good, to succeed, to prove ourselves? I think that part of the reason is because deep down we're still searching for a way to earn God's love, to get closer to God. We may not use ceremonial washings anymore, but many of us still try to make ourselves worthy by earning what I think of as the straight A's of adulthood: accomplishment, admiration, approval, acclaim. But here's the good news. We don't need to prove ourselves to God or to earn God's love. Jesus comes not only to bring wine, the very best wine, but also to bring joy, the sort of lasting joy that is found in a relationship with God. And that's the miracle at Cana. So friends, today, if joy feels distant in your life, hear this as an invitation to seek joy, not fleeting happiness, not a denial of life's suffering, but a deep and abiding reality found in a relationship with God. Joy is part of the fullness of life that Jesus calls us to, and when it's absent, God is calling us to do something about that. And the good news is there are tools we can use to foster joy in our own lives. If you feel joy is missing in your life, perhaps you can carve out time for prayer and meditation, time to simply be with God and be in God's presence. Or maybe you can find joy by seeking community, a group of people who sees you and knows you and love you, people with whom you can laugh and cry and truly be yourself. Maybe joy for you will be found by stepping outside of yourself, by serving others. There is abundant joy found in being the hands and feet of Christ in the world. And maybe you will find joy by seeking the wisdom of therapists, or the power of medicine, or the gifts of modern psychology. After all, these are not signs of weakness. They're gifts from God, the fruits of minds created in God's image, designed to bring healing and wholeness to us. Yes, life inevitably will have its challenges and its valleys. There will always be grief and hardship and disappointment and moments when happiness feels elusive. But it's the joy found in a relationship with God that gives us the resilience to walk through these valleys. You see, God wants joy for us, joy for me and joy for each of you. Joy that springs up from within, that sustains us, that reflects God's will and desire for our lives. Tomorrow, as I'm sure you know, is Martin Luther King Day. Over the last few years, I've taken on a sort of spiritual discipline of listening to his speech, "I Have a Dream," every year on this anniversary. I certainly invite you to do the same. It will ensure you at least get one great sermon this weekend. About 3/4 of the way through the speech, he introduces his famous refrain, "I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain made low, the rough places will be made plain, the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope." You see, Martin Luther King's dream was deeply rooted in his Christian faith. It was a vision of hope, of goodness, of God's kingdom coming to this earth here and now. It was a vision of joy of what he called the brotherhood of all people, joy of freedom and peace, joy that knows God is at work, joy that refuses to give up or give in, because this joy rests in an abiding relationship with God. In Cana, after the water was transformed into wine, we read that the new wine was brought to the person in charge. In the Greek, the term used here, architikrinos, means much more than just a person in charge. The term is much closer to an architect who makes sure that everything comes together, that all the pieces fit, that everything is beautiful and right and as it should be. So when Jesus stepped in to fix this problem, Jesus was making a declaration: I am the true master of the banquet. I am the architect of all that is good. I have come to bring joy, deep and abiding and soul-filling joy. Jesus turning the water into wine clearly was a miracle, but it was also a declaration that Jesus is the true source of joy, joy that sustains us and renews us and fills the deepest longings of each of our hearts. This was a statement of purpose, setting the tone for the rest of the ministry, where Jesus showed us that his ultimate mission is to make all things new in him and in his love and joy. When Jesus began his ministry, this very first sign didn't take place in a cathedral or a synagogue. It didn't take place in a temple or a palace. It took place at a wedding, a celebration of love, a celebration of joy. His first act wasn't about scarcity, it was about abundance. You see, Jesus came not only to transform water into wine, but to turn despair into hope, sorrow into joy, and death itself into life. Jesus has come to bring joy for us, for you and for me, deep and abiding and eternal joy that is found through a relationship with him. Amen.